Hello and welcome to this episode of Beat Teacher Burnout. This is a really interesting episode for me because as I spoke to Rebekah before we started, she reduced me to tears and then she started crying. We're both previously leaders in schools and we both burnt out with really severe physical symptoms and we miss it. So our heart today is to share with you what happened to us, our journeys, and how you can put things in place for both yourself, your colleagues, your staff team, so that what happened to us doesn't happen to you. So let's start. Let's just launch straight in. Welcome, Rebekah. Why don't you tell everyone a bit about you?
Hi, yeah, it's really lovely to be here. So I'm a mum of 5 children. I have 2 children who are diagnosed with autism and ADHD. And I was a head teacher. I went into teaching rather late in my career, was a housewife for a very long time, and then loved just being in the classroom, loved being with the children, and could see that I could make a real impact. I became a Senko quite early on. I had a lot of experience with SEND in my own personal life, and I think that shone through. And so when I began to see the impact I could have as a Senko across the school, I wanted more of that, and so moved through kind of the ranks through to leadership and headship. And then I left in April 2025. And I don't know whether this is a good time, Raina, to say why. I definitely didn't want to leave, and it was something that my body and my health in some respects has made me had to make that decision. So in September 2023, while I was delivering our INSET day, I had what I now know is Takotsubo cardiomyopathy, which you might know better as broken heart disease, and it's a stress-related heart failure that's temporary, but in the moment feels exactly like a heart attack. I'd managed to get through my training, and afterwards I said to my deputy, I just don't feel right, and thankfully she persuaded me to go to the hospital. I took some time out, I rested for a while. However, while I was resting, I was still keen. I'd only been a year and a bit into my headship, and I still wanted the school to move forward. So I did a lot of training while I was off. I did a lot of talking to my colleagues still. And then I came back, and initially things seemed okay. But I'd lost my confidence and resilience, I think. I was anxious I'd have another heart attack. And that kind of came to a head really in the autumn term of 2024, and I realised I couldn't be the head teacher I wanted to be for my staff or my community, and so made the very hard decision to leave. And that's kind of where I'm at the moment.
Well, I guess this is why we both were in tears before the episode, before the recording, because my story is there's so much parallel. My first major warning was ending up in an ambulance. They thought I was having a heart attack. And yet we went back in and we didn't change significantly the way we did life, our mindset, our habits, we didn't go in taking action to prevent this happening again. And I suppose the reason for the tears for us both was because we both were absolutely passionate about what we did. We loved it and we threw our whole selves into it. And I think you said to me that you were working till midnight or 1 a.m. because you wanted to do it excellently. And I guess what was your way of, when you were a leader, how were you doing your job, I suppose, in a way that didn't value yourself? What were you doing? What did it look like?
I think as a leader, I wanted to be there for everybody. And so, and I think I achieved that, but probably at the detriment of my health. And I wanted to make sure that my staff and the children and the community had everything they needed to make our school an excellent place to be for children to learn and to grow, not just academically, but also their whole selves. I have a really deep passion for SEND, and, you know, taking on children. I got known as being the inclusive head teacher, and taking on children that, you know, other schools had not wanted as such. And I just gave everything. I had 5 children at home that probably came second a lot of the time, which is really hard to admit. But they had what I could see as a really nice life, and we went on holidays and did lovely things, and was able to give them those experiences. And the schools I worked in, there were children that often didn't get those, and I wanted to be that person to help them, because I know as when I was a child, I came from quite a deprived background, and having those experiences really helped me to flourish as a person, and I wanted that for them. And I think, yeah, you go back and I just wanted to do it all again. I didn't take the warning that I needed to take, and that's why I ended up, unwell again, and now on medication and things for blood pressure. And I wish that I'd probably put more strategies in place to support them, myself, and also my staff as well, because I think I tried to take on too much to help them. So yeah, it's a really hard question of what did it look like, because you're so busy and in it, you don't always see what it actually looks like. But I think it was just unsustainable, and I gave everything I could to being the best head teacher I could for everybody. And I think that just ended up making it worse for me in some respects. So a lot of it, I would say, is probably self-inflicted to some degree, because you want to do your best by everybody.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the hard things about this, isn't it? You want to be the best at your job that you possibly can. So you throw everything into it. I remember I would be one of the first into school every day, because then I'd have that hour quiet before, everybody came in, and I could then go around the school and support people and whatever as they came in. But actually, I now look at it and I think, was I proud of the fact that I was first in? Because it said something about my work ethic and how important what I do is, and maybe even I got some validation for being the first in, because it made me perhaps important. I don't know. But I guess we need to be questioning what we're doing and how we're doing it, because, I mean, one of the stories I tell a lot is running into the house at 5 o'clock on a Friday, into the home, and my kids were all just about to go on holiday, and I'd forgotten to put the clippers across one of my kids' hair. And so I did it really quickly, but as I went from the front down across to the back, I'd forgotten to put on the number 4 clipper attachment. And so this child was bald down the middle. And, I just remember that feeling of utter, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, or I think I was closer to having a tantrum. I wanted to throw myself on the floor and say, look, I've had a really busy week. Lots hasn't gone wrong. I've given it my everything, and I still can't get anything right, because I hadn't prioritized what really mattered to me. Because my 4 kids, they're my absolute priority. And I mean, they're all grown now, and we laugh about that sort of thing. And they have wonderfully forgiven me for that, and for an awful lot of other things that I did over the years. But actually, I would be saying to people today who are listening to this, just take a moment and think to yourself, how are you living? Where are you on your to-do list? Where are you? Where are your kids? Where whatever and whoever matters to you? Because is that being true to yourself and what really, really matters to you? Because you've said, Rebekah, your kids are so important. You didn't always prioritize them.
Absolutely, and I think you're absolutely hit the nail on the head. I met a lady who became my coach just a month before I had the heart attack. So actually, it was a little bit late in that sense, that she could have probably helped me a lot more to manage my sustainability as a head teacher had I met her earlier. And it was almost like that role modeling what you expect. You know, I used to say to my staff, family comes first, take that time, don't come in if you're not feeling well. And I just ignored all that advice myself because I had this big, I don't know whether it was wanting to seem like I was the best or anything like that, but I had this big complex of I'm not going to be seen as being good enough. And I think that imposter syndrome possibly around that of I've got to give everything because I have to make it work. And that was really hard to, you know, I've talked a lot about that since I've left, and I've realised that there were times that I prioritised school over myself, definitely, and my family. And, you know, my children are all grown up as well now. And, you know, they, again, have forgiven probably some of the things that I did that I probably shouldn't have done. And, you know, forgetting parents' meetings, sitting down to eat dinner very late and things like that. And, you know, it's really hard. You do have to stop in the moment. We're so busy all the time that I think if I'd stopped and looked around me a bit more and had somebody to support me in doing that, there may have been very different decisions I'd made along the way that would have helped sustain what I really love doing, which is being in school and teaching and supporting children. And I think there's a missed opportunity there within our sector for supervision and coaching, which should be the norm. It's, you know, I found my own coach. Initially, I paid for it myself. The governors then took that on when I came back. It shouldn't have been me having to look for that. It should have been something that is provided for head teachers, Senkos, teachers. We had a lady start with us who came from a children's home, and it's part of their package, supervision. And I definitely think we deal with so many vulnerable and complex problems that having that support would have helped enormously to offload. I think, you know, particularly as being a head teacher and or in some kind of leadership, it's very difficult to find the people to offload to. And I had people who could support me, but they had busy lives as well. So carving out that time would have really supported me, I think, looking back at it. And I think it is something that we as a sector need to really look at, is how are we supporting people's emotional well-being when we're dealing with high SEND needs, reducing budgets, you know, deficits, trying to resource the things you need to resource, the high stakes accountability. How are we actually supporting the people that need it the most?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do remember that I coached some of the amazing staff in one of my schools for a while. As the leader, I don't know if I was assistant head or deputy at that point, or both. I think there was a conflict there actually, because some of what was an issue for them that they probably needed to talk about, they probably felt they couldn't because I was part of a team that was making the decisions. And actually, I think yeah, I'm just not convinced that's going to work by having that opportunity. So quite often there was a bit of discomfort in there. Although I had really good relationships with the staff, I don't think it was 100% real and raw, and they couldn't really sort of say what they wanted. Because I know that is a model that schools sometimes go with, but I'm not convinced how helpful it is. But going back to the sort of burnout and the getting sick in such an extreme way for growing numbers of us, actually, you know, we've got to put things in place that bring a stop to this. And you touched on the imposter syndrome. And I was actually at a conference this weekend, and one of the speakers he's a coach to some of the most successful people that I've heard of. And he used to be a pastor, I think, but he said that everybody he's met, however successful they all have that concern that they're going to be found out, that someone will discover they don't know everything. And actually, none of us are going to know everything, are we? And why do we have to appear like we do? What's that? Is there an element of pride in us? Is there a fear that we're going to be rejected and we're going to somehow lose our role because we are vulnerable and we're being honest about what we can't do? Or actually, is it something that we can admit to and we can say to the team, look, this isn't my strength and I really don't know where we're going. But what about you? I see that as a strength in you. And it then pulls that person in and up, actually. I don't know. What's your views on it?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it was a sense of rejection and being found out, definitely, and that maybe I wasn't as good as people thought I was should be. And actually, I'm quite an outward looking person, so I'm quite happy to say to somebody, I don't know the answer to that, but I will find out. But that almost made me more kind of driven to find the answer rather than maybe looking around me to see who that could have been within my own team or in somebody I already knew, so I could tap into that. It's a really hard one, isn't it? That if and I've heard this, that even those really successful people are still feel that they're going to be found out or something's going to go wrong and it's all going to fall apart. I think we put a lot of pressure not just on ourselves but society as a whole, that success is seen as earning good money, having a title, and actually success shouldn't be those things. It should be what's in your heart, what you value. And success for me, really, if I really get down to it, would be seeing a child who couldn't write be able to write a letter. One of my most precious moments was I was teaching 9 year 3 children that came up to our junior school, couldn't read and write, and this little boy had formed the perfect A, and we all had to take time out of the lesson for 10 minutes while he showed everybody his book because he was so excited. And they're the things that are precious and make you realize you're making a difference, not the title of head teacher or the money or the salary or the and I wonder if it comes from the societal kind of pressure to make you need to be this outstanding person, and the accountability measures we put in education, and I'm sure are in other sectors as well. I'm not saying that schools can't be accountable. We absolutely have to be. We've got precious lives in our hands that we need to allow to thrive and flourish and have their very best that they can have out of their lives. But the high stakes that come to it, outstanding, those words, and I know things are changing, but those words are almost putting that pressure on. I've got to be outstanding as a head teacher. I've got to be able to answer these questions. I've got to be able to deal with these issues. And actually, we're human and we can't deal with them all. And we need to, have more acceptance of that, I think, around us, so that we can step back and say, actually, I don't know the answer to this. Let's go, who does? How can we get help and get support for it? It's a really difficult pressure that is just there. And I don't know how you relieve that when it's so ingrained in the education system. It's not, even if you think about accountability, it's even there for children with phonics screenings and multiplication checks and key stage 2 SATs and GCSE. It's always about, what am I going to do next? How am I going to achieve? How am I going to be successful? And actually, the success should be those little moments where that child was able to form his perfect day and was so excited about it, rather than anything else.
Yeah, no, I mean, the story that comes to me is one of my favorite days in all my 30-something years in school was quite recently, when I had a child came to me in lunchtime into the reflection space, and we were talking about what he'd done, and I think he was about 5 or 6 or something, and he'd just been messing about in class, and I said to him, you're really special. You don't need to get the teacher's attention by messing around. She'll give you attention anyway. And we were talking it all through, and at the end of it, I sent him off, and the next day his mum came and said to me, do you really think my child's special? And I looked at her and I said, yeah, of course he is, definitely. And she said, all he came back with after school yesterday was that you'd called him special. He hadn't heard any of the sort of, okay, let's sit on our seats and let's do what we, just heard that he was special. And she had heard that he was special. And it has sat with me, because it feels like if we're doing something like that to transform a child's and a parent's view of themselves, we've done something awesome. And that was a moment you could have lost. But actually, that's why we're doing what we're doing, isn't it? And I suppose that brings us back to the psychological safety of, are we in a place where we can admit we've made a mistake or we're not feeling good enough? You know, do we have that trust and that safety in our schools? And maybe again, this is a pause if you're listening and thinking, does that exist in our schools in a place, or are we just running so fast through the day, which is definitely what I used to do? I never stopped to think about it. I was just so focused on wanting to support the children, the families, the staff. I didn't stop to think of, am I doing this in the best way, in the most healthy way? And certainly for Rebekah and myself, we weren't doing it in the most healthy way because we couldn't sustain it. And something's got to change, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. You just constantly, and in a school, everything. The decisions you have to make on the hoof, and there's constantly things happening. It's very difficult to carve out that time to just reflect. And I can remember my coach saying, "You're being paid to be strategic. You need time to think." And I thought, God, that's really alien to me, because I need to support this child over here who's behavior is really disrupting the rest of the school, and I need to support there, and I need to support this child who's in crisis because they're having a autism meltdown or something going on here, and I need to support this teacher who's really struggling at this moment in time with the class or with a particular issue or something at home. And you forget to actually carve out those moments where you can reflect and pause and think. And I think you're absolutely right about safety within our schools, for us to be able to share those moments when you're feeling really down. And I was lucky; I had some really good relationships with my previous head teacher. I also my deputy. We did talk openly about how we were feeling, but there still wasn't that being able to release that somewhere outside of that school environment. And being able to speak to somebody. And absolutely, there are lots of schools that do coaching, and I think that's amazing that they do that, and they're already trying to support their staff in that way. But I do think there's something about talking to someone outside that is really releasing and gives you the freedom to be able to really share without feeling like you might be judged or questioned about it. And I think that's really important as well, and that's what we need to bring in, to be able to give people the feeling of safety and trust. And we talk about this all the time for children. We talk about adaptive ways of doing things, inclusion, safeguarding, but actually, are we safeguarding and including our staff? And I think that's something that we need to begin to really think about in schools, and how we do that, but maintaining ourselves, because we can try as one person, but it's not sustainable. And that's that is something that's happened to me, is I wasn't able to sustain holding everybody else up. You have so many people that you're trying to keep at an equilibrium. You've got your parents and carers, your governors, the local authority, you've got teachers, LSAs, the children, the whole community, and you can't do that on your own. And for whatever reason, whether that was because I was not able to delegate, whether I was self-inflicted some of that myself by wanting to be the best I could for everybody, you need those support mechanisms in schools for people who are trying to do those things, because it's too much for one person on their own.
Hello, I'm Rowena Hicks, and I'm so pleased to introduce this course to you. It's a short, practical, made to fit into your current routine course that I hope is going to help you, because I know time is precious. Staff are frazzled at the end of the day, but actually this fits into what you're doing already. So why me? Why this? Well, I burnt out after 30 years in school as a teacher, a Senko, a specialist teacher, even an advisor, and then a leader. I burnt out. I loved it. I was passionate, but I had to leave. And that just breaks my heart. Teachers are leaving and they're going off sick. This has to stop.
So what I've designed is 5 minutes at the start of each staff meeting. You can give your team something small and powerful to build momentum. You'll build their confidence. You'll improve their well-being, their team dynamics, their energy. You reduce stress and overwhelm. And you're building habits to increase productivity, energy, and joy. So each week, there is a short action sheet, because really there isn't going to be any change without action, is there? But there's no extra cost. You're going to be consistently investing in time together to shift how staff feel. Are they seen? Are they valued? Are they heard? Give them a voice. These are small microculture changes. You're going to be building your staff team, and you're going to enable them to thrive. This isn't a well-being bolt-on. It's a culture-shifting tool built for real schools by someone who's really walked it. So let's stop staff from leaving, and let's help them to flourish and thrive in their roles.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that comes to me is I spoke to a group of head teachers recently at a conference, and I challenged them to be using their most valued strengths. And I gave them a story, and the challenge was for this particular head teacher I was telling them about was that this head teacher started to take one morning a week working out of the school environment to do the strategic stuff that she really loved and really minded about. And then for the rest of the week, she could go in and there was an element of flow because, yes, she was firefighting all week, but actually she'd done something that filled her cup, if you like, and left her feeling less worried about all these things that she was carrying that she hadn't been able to do. And at the end, I spoke to the head teachers, some of them who had listened to the talk, and they said, do you really think it's okay? Are you actually giving us permission to have half a day a week off site? And I said, well, let me put this to you. What message are you giving your deputy or your assistant heads if you trust them to run the school for half a day? Whatever it is you're doing, what message are you giving your staff? And they were going, wow, yeah, because I do trust them. And yes, of course I can do that. And it was almost like they needed that permission. And I was thinking, why is that? Shouldn't have needed it, actually. But just joining together and all agreeing as head teachers that that was fine and what a good idea. But that's just one small way of leaders starting to take note of what they need to be able to be stronger and to be able to flow, flourish, thrive, whatever you want to call it, in their role.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's lots more we could discuss, but I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, well, I mean, it comes back to that analogy, doesn't it? Putting the oxygen mask on yourself first and then on others. And, you know, I hear that a lot, and it's something that we need to be better at doing. I think there's a lot of complexity tied up in head teachers, you know, taking what will that look like to staff and making sure that they can take things like PPA at home, and so that you're giving that equity across the school rather than you're just seen as, you know. And I think that's what it's wrapped up in this, as I said, this kind of needing to always be there, be present, and this kind of service leadership, which I absolutely buy into 100%. You know, I was there to serve my community. There is no doubt in my mind about that. And one of the reasons I gave up was because I knew I didn't have the resilience to do that any longer. And I needed to give my body and myself time to rest. But within that, we've got to realise that doesn't mean giving 110% of yourself, because actually we aren't going to be able to serve our community well if we're not well ourselves. And I think that's the one thing I've really learned from the whole, you know, if I'd given myself more time to repair afterwards, if I'd not worked while I was off sick, if I'd, you know, rested more, if I hadn't thrown myself straight back into exactly the same situation. And I can remember the doctor when she signed me off, because she was like, you're not going to be happy about this, I'm going to sign you off till Christmas. And I was like, well, I thought it was only be to half term. And she said, you need to take stock and you need to reevaluate. I still didn't listen at that point. It was only at the point where actually my anxiety and my lack of resilience and everything was so high that I had to so I can't do this anymore. You know, and maybe my pathway would have been different. But it's hindsight is a great thing, isn't it? Always. So, you know, I am in the situation I'm in. I'm not going to give up on being in education. You know, I've set up a consultancy to support with SEND, because I feel that that's something that I can help with massively. I've got a lot of experience. I don't know where things are going to go. It's all a bit in a limbo at the moment, but I know that I'm not ready to give up on education. I just know that at this moment in time, I can't be a head teacher. And that's been really hard to accept. And I've had a lot of grief over it in terms of my own kind of emotion, and which is why we started the meeting probably before we spoke in tears, because I still feel very raw about it. But I know this was the right decision. And I just hope that by doing things like these podcasts that you do, that other people will be able to take time to reflect and note, and be able to take those strategies in place, put those things in place they need to help them sustain what they're doing. Because you know, retention is low, but you want people to stay in schools. We desperately need people to stay in schools and to continue the jobs that they're doing for those children. And you know, I wish I could have carried on, but I'll find another path, I think, to be able to still do that and still support people, which would be really lovely.
Oh gosh. So Rebekah, before I start crying again, because I really miss school, but I do, like you, love helping those who are in school to do it differently and to rethink how their habits are and their mindsets and their assumptions. And and I guess we're saying that if anyone listening to this would like to talk to us, we're really happy to have a chat, both of us. Rebekah, where can people find you if they want to find out more about you?
So I'm on LinkedIn under Rebekah Alsey, is my main kind of platform. I've been building up my connections since coming out of school, so I'm more than happy to connect with anybody through LinkedIn. But yeah, it's under Rebekah Alsey.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Rebekah. I just hope people have heard a message today that we don't need to be burning out in education. There's a different way of doing it, especially if there is a cultural change, a cultural shift. And it takes action, takes individual and cultural action to bring about that change. So I hope people have heard a little bit of that today. So thanks everyone for listening, and thanks, Rebekah.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. I hope you took something of value from today. If you want to connect, I'm at rowenahicks.com, or I have a Facebook group, which is Preventing Teacher Burnout. So I look forward to connecting to you at one of those.